Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday tips. So we are going to cover just a little overview of the Family First Act leave for paid wages today. Give you guys an overview. You can always reach out if you have more questions or comment, and we will have somebody get in touch and help you with that. So the big thing with the Family First leave is this is when the employee cannot come to work, but the business is still open and operating and there's still work to do. There's two separate types of leave that was done with this, and you guys can hopefully see my little chart for you here. So the first type of leave is the paid sick leave for the first 2 weeks that somebody is out. And then there's an expansion to the Family and Medical Leave Act over here. So let's talk today about the paid sick leave. That's the big thing that we're coming up and getting questions on here. So there is really 5 reasons that an employee could need this leave. They originally put out a 6. The 6 was basically, though, if there's some other disease or symptom we come up with later. At this point, they haven't come up with anything, so it's really only the top 5. So the first reason would be if they are subject to a federal, state, or a local quarantine or isolation order. This was updated that it doesn't include stay-at-home and shelter-in-place orders. So if your employee lives somewhere that's in a shelter-at-home or a stay-at-home order and the business is outside of that and still open and operating, then this would catch up then would be the time to use it. The next is if the person themselves is under a self-quarantine. So this would be that they were called by the Department of Health or told by their medical provider that they needed to quarantine because they've been exposed. The next is if they're experiencing symptoms and they're seeking that diagnosis is reason number 3. And this would cover until they know for that diagnosis. So if they went home on day 1, they couldn't get into the doctor till day 4. They got the results on day 5 saying they were negative. This would cover them day 1 through 5 until they had those negative results. And after that, it wouldn't cover it. Now, they may still actually be sick and needing to be out of work. It just would no longer be Family First at that point. So it is just why they're seeking it and looking for that diagnosis. Or if they're actually being treated for it, then of course it covers for it. So those are the first 3 reasons where it's up to the actual employee who's affected to it. At that, you would pay them up to 80 hours if they're full-time. If they are part-time, you would calculate it based on their average number of hours worked for 2 weeks, and they'd be eligible for up to that many, and that is at full pay. And you'll see that falling in this little box here. So 2 weeks, and then there's daily limits of 511, and then 2 weeks max of the $5,110 for that time. If their regular rate of pay is less than that, you won't hit it. If it's more than that, that's the limit to what you can pay under Family First. If you choose to pay above that, you can, you just would no longer get a credit back from the government on it. But so that's for the reasons the employee is sick. The other 2 reasons if somebody they're living with is sick. And so if they are caring for an individual that they legally have a responsibility to, whether this is a child under the age of 18, a significant other, a child older than 18 with disabilities who's not able to care for themselves, an elderly parent that they're responsible for, those type of reasons fall under number 4. So if that person they're taking care of is quarantined or needing taken care of. And then number 5 would be the child care version. This again is for kids under 18 or dependents who are above 18 but permanently disabled and unable to care for themselves. You can't just take care of your 22-year-old because you want 2 weeks off of work. So with that, if the school or their place of care that they regularly go to is closed, then they would be eligible for these 2 reasons for those same up to 2 weeks of full time, but it's at 2/3 pay. For these 2 weeks, the business cannot force them to take additional leave, sick leave, PTO, any other version of paid leave the employer has. The employee in this box, though, can opt to if the employee wants to, but just up till they get back to the regular rate of pay instead of 2/3. So they could do 1/3 of a day type of situation to get up to full pay. This still all caps at the 2 weeks. Since this is at 2/3 pay, it does have different daily and 2-week maximums. So the $200 per day or the $2,000 for the 2 weeks for full-time employees. And all of that would be prorated or allocated out based on how many hours they work if they're part-time in their regular rate of pay. You do have to pay regular rate of pay or at least minimum wage. And so where it becomes more complicated and you really want to talk to your accountant is if you have commissions or piece rate work or tips that bring them up to minimum wage. You want to make sure that that is something you're considering for those employees. So that's your paid sick leave. There's 2 weeks as one time, and currently this does expire the end of December, so it's only this month currently. And once they've used those 2 weeks, they're done. If they use the 2 weeks or already did earlier this year and now are sick again for another 2 weeks, this is no longer an option for them at this point. We may see if that changes. So any business that has less than 500 employees is required to follow this. It is a law, not an option for your employees. There is a small exception for businesses with less than 50 employees, but it's very strict. I mean, you could basically sum it up as if it would put you out of business or into bankruptcy to pay this, then you don't have to. But if you can't prove it's that dire, you really do have to pay this. The good news is it's a credit that you get back right away. Before I cover the credit quick, let's just really quickly go into this expanded leave over here. So this is only eligible when that school or place of care is closed. And this can be for an additional 10 weeks on top of the 2 weeks that they could have taken in paid leave. So for these 10 weeks, these people have to have been employed with you for at least 30 days prior to being eligible for the leave. For everybody else, it could be right after they started. But here they have to be employed at least the 30 days, and they can't just voluntarily keep their kids home. If their school has an option where they're full distance learning and they opt into that and need to stay home, that no longer counts. They had a choice. That school is still open. Where this will come into effect is if the school is part-time open and part-time closed. You know, some of our local ones were open 2 days and then off for 3 days of the week. Those 3 days of the week do cover in this case because the school is closed and will not take them those 3 days. So that would qualify for this, and they can do that off and on. So they could use 3 days this week, 3 days next week, and still work and not be on paid leave for those other times. So that's the only thing that they expanded is taking care of the kids for. If the employee is still sick or somebody they're taking care of is still sick and you fall under the FMLA, you would follow those guidelines to see if it qualifies. It just would not be covered under Family First. And then this is still at 2/3 pay. In this case though, only for the expanded after the first 2 weeks, the business can decide that they want the employee to use their paid leave they have at work already first. If the business does not decide that, it is up to the employee to decide if they want to supplement the 2/3 pay, again, up to the regular rate. So in this case, there's a little bit of choice on either the business or employee of who is taking paid leave before they get this. You just can't discriminate. So if the business decides the first person is taking their paid leave, they all have to take it after that first and make it the same for everybody. And that then is up to a $10,000 limit, which is the $200 per day for the 10 weeks. So let's talk the credit really quick while we still have just a little bit of time left. How do you get this back? So you're first going to pay that employee this amount. And then when you go to make your payroll tax deposit, you would calculate it the same way you always would. When you go online to make that payment on EFTPS.gov, you would subtract out the gross wages that you paid to this employee. So let's say your deposit was $1,000, you would pay this employee $500 for their time off. You would then, your 1,000 minus your 500, you would pay in $500 still. If let's say the employee still got $500, but your normal deposit was only $500, you would just not make a deposit for that time period, and that would be reconciled when you did your quarterly 941. If it was the opposite, let's say that you had $1,000 in paid sick leave for your credit, but your normal deposit is only $500, then you would not make a payment for this EFTPS payment. Additionally, you would not make a payment for your next EFTPS payment as well to get that still back before you're back on track. The other option, if you don't want to wait and reduce it on your next EFTPS.gov payment, you could then send in Form 7200. It's supposed to be a fast refund, but there hasn't been any guidance issued. So usually it is faster if there's in the month and the quarter for you to make payroll tax payments to just wait and reduce your next deposit. But you do have that Form 90 or 7200, excuse me, if you want to request it that way. Then finally, you get down to your quarterly payroll report. If you didn't request enough back, if you requested too much back, all of that will be worked out on that Form 941. When you put it in there, there's extra lines, and you would be able to either get a refund for the difference that you didn't yet claim, or you'd have to pay in more if you'd claimed too much, but would be reconciled there. I think that's the big overview for you guys today. If you guys have questions on how to do it, how to enter it in your software, it's a great time to reach out to your accountant. We're here and willing to help.